Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here with the latest episode of the Disco Deep Dive, where I take a look at the Easter eggs, canon connections, and continuity bits for the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery. Doing a bit of catch up here, this is for the third episode, People of Earth. Be warned, for those of you who have not seen the episode, there are spoilers in this video, so if you have not watched People of Earth, proceed at your own discretion. The episode begins with a personal log by Commander Burnham. She gives the stardate as 865211.3. This is one digit before the decimal place longer than we've ever gotten before in Star Trek, showing the setting of this episode as being in the far future, namely the 32nd century. Now, I maybe should have done so, but I have not sat down and done the math to see if this conforms to the TNG era style of stardates, where it goes up by 1,000 for each year, but I leave that to you, to the viewer out there. Let me know, does this actually track for the year 3189, or is it just a random number that's a little longer, meant to kind of obfuscate what the heck the whole Stardate system is all about? We learn a little bit more about the burn in this episode. Previously, we'd heard it was when most of the dilithium in the galaxy went boom, according to Book. Here we learn that what actually happened was that dilithium within active warp reactors went inert, causing the matter-antimatter reaction to be unregulated. This caused what was so eloquently put as boom. We have a 47 alert in this episode. We see Burnham gathering evidence for what exactly happened to Starfleet and the Federation, and one of the artifacts she gets is a small device that we can see here with the registry number of a Federation starship that starts NCC 4774. So we see here the latest example of 47 in Star Trek. If you don't know what the relation of the number 47 to Star Trek is, check out episode number 47 of the Positively Trek podcast. Bruce Gibson and I talked to Star Trek expert Larry Nemechek, and he told us all about the history of that number in the franchise. During the course of this episode, we hear a transmission from the Federation, namely from Admiral Synthohol, based on Earth. During the message, the word Federation is somewhat garbled. I'm curious if this is perhaps an origin of the term Vidrash. Listen closely and judge for yourself.
This is Admiral Synthohol. I will wait for any who would join us on Earth. Anyone who still believes in us. The Federation lives on. But we need.
The question of the captaincy of Discovery is finally settled once and for all in this episode when Michael Burnham steps aside and Captain Saru takes the center seat on a permanent basis. This marks a milestone for Star Trek continuity. Saru is the first non-human main character captain of a starship. Welcome, Saru, to the ranks of some of Starfleet's greatest captains. Earth is continually referred to as being far removed from the rest of civilization in this episode, and I think it's a really interesting position for Earth to be in. In this iteration of Star Trek, Earth has now become the frontier, and the more far-flung systems are actually the more kind of central locations. For example, Burnham tells Book that he can make a new life, nobody knows him, out that far. I just think this is a really interesting perspective, showing Earth as not the center of the universe as we get in most other Star Treks. So not so much an Easter egg, but just an interesting little observation. When the Discovery arrives at Earth, they're contacted by a Captain Ndoye, who says, "A view screen. How quaint." I can't be the only Star Trek fan that was reminded of Scotty's famous line from Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, when confronted with having to use a 20th century Apple computer.
Hello, computer.
Just use the keyboard.
The keyboard. How quaint.
Captain Ndoye and her forces are not a part of the Federation or of Starfleet, and are in fact members of the United Earth Defense Force. United Earth is the official name of the government of Earth throughout most of Star Trek history. We see its earlier days in Star Trek Enterprise, and presumably throughout all of the rest of the series, the government of that planet is called United Earth. The name was probably first mentioned when Captain Kirk says that the Enterprise is a ship of the United Earth Space Probe Agency in the first season of Star Trek, the original series. At one point, Burnham asks Book if he remembers their escapade on Donatu 7. The Donatu system has been mentioned before in Star Trek, with Donatu 5 being the site of a major skirmish between the United Federation of Planets and the Klingon Empire sometime in the pre-TOS era. This battle was first mentioned in the teaser for the original series episode The Trouble with Tribbles. Book at one point takes a drink from the synthesizer on Discovery, and Burnham tells him that it is Synthohol. Now, interestingly enough, according to the TNG 6th season episode Relics, Synthohol, which is a synthetic replacement for alcohol with none of the deleterious effects, was introduced to Federation starships sometime after the 23rd century. So it seems odd that Discovery would have Synthohol. However, Bruce Gibson outlined an interesting theory that kind of explains this away a little bit, in that the drink that Book had was not in fact Synthohol, but Michael Burnham, who of course, as we know, has spent a year in the future, merely wanted to convince him it was to keep him from drinking it. As we learn a few moments later, the plan that they're about to undertake failed previously, but might work this time because, as Book says, he's sober this time. So it might be that Burnham was wanting to prevent another failure, as had happened earlier when Book was apparently under the influence of a non-synthaholic beverage. I don't know, my instinct says this is a bit of a mistake, but I do like that clever way of explaining it away. In the course of a battle in orbit of Earth, the Discovery is hit by a pair of quantum torpedoes. Quantum torpedoes are the successor to photon torpedoes and were first mentioned in the Deep Space Nine episode Defiant as being a much more powerful alternative to the standard Starfleet weapon of the past century. The mysterious Wen is unmasked by Philippa Georgiou, and we see that he is played by Christopher Heyerdahl. You may recognize this Canadian actor for a number of roles over the years. I most quickly recognize him from the Stargate franchise, where he has played a number of characters in both Stargate SG-1 and Atlantis. We get the revelation that Adira, while human, is playing host to a Trill symbiont. This caused a few people to kind of do a double take and wonder, how can a human carry a Trill symbiont? Well, I will cast your memory back to the Star Trek The Next Generation 4th season episode The Host, where the Trill were first introduced. We meet Ambassador Odan, who, thanks to a medical emergency, requires the transplanting of his symbiont into a new host. Enter Commander Riker, who carries the Odan symbiont despite being a human. While this was not a viable long-term solution in that episode, it has been almost 1,000 years since then, and it's likely that medical technology has improved quite a bit. A human carrying a Trill host is certainly not unprecedented, as the episode that introduced the Trill for the very first time featured this very same phenomenon. After tensions are eased following the ceasefire between United Earth and Wen's forces, the crew of Discovery are invited down to the surface for a visit. A number of officers choose to visit the grounds of the former Starfleet Academy, situated near the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. San Francisco has long been shown in Star Trek to be the seat of Starfleet Command as well as Starfleet Academy, with the city first visually appearing in the Star Trek universe in 1979's Star Trek The Motion Picture. It has been shown many times since, throughout the TOS films, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise, as well as in the Kelvin Timeline films. And finally, towards the end of the episode, we see Saru setting up Georgiou's telescope. You may remember Saru, Burnham, and Georgiou using this telescope in the very first episode of Star Trek Discovery, The Vulcan Hello. After that, the telescope was willed to Michael Burnham after the death of the Prime Universe Philippa Georgiou. Burnham, in turn, gave it to Saru early in Discovery's first season. Well, those were all of the Easter eggs that I found in this episode. Were there any that I missed? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you, of course, to the Patreon supporters for your help in bringing these episodes to you. I really do appreciate it and could not do it without you. To everyone else, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please like and share it if you found it worthy, and subscribe to Kertrats Productions if you haven't already. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, as always, live long and prosper.